Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with Victory 4x4. Today in the garage we're going to be installing the strike sliders you see here on our 2023 Toyota Tundra. So here I have one full slider. The one you're seeing here is the passenger side slider, and the way you can identify that is just going to be the small kick out, if you will, on the front side of the bracket. So figuring out the front of each slider will help you identify driver and passenger side and get you going on your install. Now throughout the video we will kind of jump around from driver to passenger side just a little bit so that we can show you everything you need to know to get these installed, but we will do our best to call out which side we're working on at any given time to help prevent you guys from getting confused throughout the installation. So with all that being said, we'll get the truck up in the air in our lift and get started over here on the driver's side. So here you're looking at the driver's side frame rail kind of between the transmission cross member and the rear lower control arm mount. In here you're going to be looking for the 5 round holes kind of toward the center section of this frame rail. On this side we already have those Riv Nuts installed, so we will jump over to the passenger side to show you how to drill and install one over there. So we are drilling these out to 11/16. In order to do that you can use a conventional twist drill if that's what you have available. If not, these step bits or unibits are pretty easy to come by at most of your local hardware and home stores and work pretty well. As you can see here, we've got some tape on this one. That's just to kind of indicate where we're drilling to so that we don't over drill or go too far, because then you won't be able to install those Riv Nuts. From here, it's just a matter of getting all 5 of these drilled out. After you get that drilled out, grab one of your 1/2-inch Riv Nuts and just install it temporarily into that hole. Make sure it fits nicely. A little bit snug here is okay, but you don't want to have to hammer these in or drive them in with any sort of tool. From there, you'll need to assemble your Riv Nut installation tool. So it'll be this 2-inch long 1/2-inch bolt, followed by a 1/2-inch SAE washer, a large 5/8 nut. This should be the only nut of its size in your bolt pack, another SAE washer, and then the Riv Nut itself can be installed. You can then take that whole tool assembly and insert it into the desired hole location. You'll need a 15/16 wrench to hold that center nut, and then a 3/4 socket to drive the bolt. Basically what you're doing here is compressing that Riv Nut until it's seated tight to the frame. So kind of use your judgment here. Once you feel that Riv Nut stop, you'll have to kind of listen for your impact. Go ahead and back it off and kind of check that it's seated. You can always go a little bit further if necessary. When checking these, you're just going to be looking to see and make sure that the threads are seated kind of tight against the top or inside of this frame material. So you can repeat that same Riv Nut installation process on the remaining round holes throughout the center there. And then coming out to the side, you'll see these black plastic caps. You should have, I think, 4 of these along the side of the frame rail. To get those removed, you'll grab a flat blade screwdriver or a panel pry tool like I have here. Just kind of dig in behind it. And those should pop free pretty easily. While you still have that clip or panel tool in hand, come up here to this ground. This is specific to the passenger side frame rail. You're just going to want to pop its retaining clip here out of the frame. You can then grab a 12mm socket or wrench to pull the one bolt holding this in place. Now we do have a slotted cutout here on your actual slider mounting bracket, so you can just temporarily put that bolt back there so you don't have to worry about losing it. This is really what we want to get out of the way for now. One thing to note here, kind of important, do not go back and either start the vehicle and try and move it, or even just power it up at this time, just to kind of play it safe with the module that this is grounding. Then moving even further up the frame toward the front of the vehicle, you're going to be looking for these 2 vertical holes. Those 2, I want to point out now, will receive 1/2-inch thread cutting bolts once your slider is up in place. And then you'll also want to take your panel tool and pop this one kind of forward brake line clip free as well. With everything kind of prepped on the truck and the vehicle frame side of things, we now need to get this lifted into position, kind of up alongside the frame on this mounting bracket side so that we can keep moving forward with the install. So for that, since we're doing it on a hoist, I'm gonna have a friend kind of help me lift this up over the hoist arms. We'll get this inside mounting bracket up tight to the frame and kind of show you how to keep moving forward from here. For those of you that may be doing this in your garage or your driveway, you're gonna wanna grab probably a friend, maybe just a floor jack and a couple jack stands. Kind of use the tools you have available to you there so that you can get this up alongside the frame and keep moving forward. Now, as you lift this into position, the easiest place to start is by grabbing the 1.5 inch long 1/2 inch bolts with these clear zinc washers and getting those installed into the Riv Nuts that we put in the frame earlier on. Once you have a few of those started, we can kind of get our jack down and out of the way since it's now supported by those bolts. One thing to note here, anywhere that you're supporting this with a jack or jack stands, whatever it may be, just protect it with something, some sort of rag or cloth, so you're not damaging the finish on your slider. With those 5 bolts started, I'm gonna grab a 3/4 socket and we'll kind of run these up just to pull this closer to the frame. You don't want to tighten it so much that you lose your front to rear adjustment just yet. Then coming out to the side, you can find 2 of the 5 inch long 1/2 inch bolts. You're gonna use a clear zinc washer on here, and then on the inside, you'll use this 3/4 washer, followed by another of those clear zinc washers and the 1/2 inch nylock nut. So in this location, you're passing this all the way through the frame. This one is just behind the second mounting leg from the front. You may have to kind of lift this back up. Then once you have that all the way through, again, install the 2 washers and the nut here on the inside. Now the next one of those is going to go all the way in the rear mounting hole on the side of the frame out here. What I do want to talk about, the reason we use that nylock nut, basically because you're not tightening to a solid surface, there's not a sleeve or anything that goes all the way through the frame there. You want to use that nylock nut to let you tighten this down enough that you're drawing the slider up nice and tight to the frame, but not so much that you're compressing the actual box frame material, and then that nylock's going to hold it from backing off over time. With those 2 long bolts started through the sides and the 5 shorter bolts started along the bottom, you can now start using that hardware to draw this both up and into the frame rail a little bit tighter, as all the remaining holes are going to be kind of drilled and use self-tappers or thread cutting bolts. Pay attention as you're doing this to kind of position this front to rear. Look at this front mount where it mounts out to this kind of body mount kick out. Make sure that it's nice and tight there, but still not pulling it or forcing it off of the frame too much in this location. So moving on to those thread cutting bolts, they're going to be 1 inch long 1/2 inch bolts. They are a flanged head that you can kind of see here, and they're easily identifiable by the kind of tapered cutting end. To get these installed, you are going to want to start by center punching each hole location. You're just kind of aiming for the center of each slot. And then you'll start by drilling a pilot hole. I have an 1/8 inch bit here. Now before you can install these, you're going to need to drill this all the way out to 7/16 for these 1/2 inch bolts. I'm doing that with a step bit or a unibit like I have here. You can do the same thing with a conventional twist drill set. As you can see, I have a right angle drill as well. It shouldn't necessarily be required, but it will make this a lot easier down in this location. Once you have it opened up to the correct hole size, you'll grab a 3/4 socket, ideally on an impact, and one of the thread cutting bolts. You can kind of line that up on the hole, apply some pressure to your impact and run this in. That installation process will be essentially the same for all of these, aside from the two that already have kind of pre-existing factory holes, in which case you'll just thread the bolts right into those with no drilling required. So there's a total of 8 of these, 6 of which have to be drilled. One of them is the very back hole down here on this bottom flange. The rest should pretty much be all up on the side, and then a couple on a kick-out flange up front that we'll show you in a second. So moving up here just to kind of show you what's going on, this is that kick-out flange I mentioned. This comes out to the factory body mount, and then here you can see the two that are kind of vertically aligned. Those are where you'll have existing factory holes in the frame and will not need to drill. So as you come over to the passenger side to get your slider installed, you will first have to also remove this wire harness mounting bracket that you kind of see up here. You'll need a 12mm socket to get this bolt removed, and then it reinstalls right over the slider bracket like we have it here. Then additionally, go ahead and reconnect that ground cable, as well as check clearance to the brake lines toward the front. Make sure they're not rubbing on the slider or the frame. Now those of you that purchased the step plates are now going to be ready to get those installed. You're actually going to see us install those on our 3rd gen Toyota Sequoia. However, that installation pretty much crosses over directly to this, with the only real difference being the number of center mounting locations throughout the slider. Aside from that, everything is identical. The hardware and the actual step plates themselves, at least in terms of the way they mount, are going to be exactly the same. Before you put the step plates on, you're going to want to find the adhesive rubber pads. You're going to have triangles and rectangles, 1 triangle on each end of the slider, and then you'll have 3 of these that go down in the center. These are pretty straightforward. They're just adhesive backed, so you peel the backing and stick them down. Be sure to wipe your slider down, make sure it's clean and free of any dust, dirt, debris, and use a residue-free cleaner. And then it's just a matter of lining up the slotted hole and sticking those down into place. Now the step plates are made up of 2 pieces. These are mirrored parts, so simply flip it if it doesn't look like it's lining up. Once you have them in the correct orientation, it's really pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of laying them down on the slider, lining up the mounting holes with the slotted holes in the slider itself, and then you'll install the black 1/4 20 button head bolts with washers and serrated flange nuts from underneath. In the center where both panels meet, you'll have a half circle cutout on each panel. Just go ahead and make sure those are both lined up before you get your hardware installed. After you get all that hardware started loosely by hand, you can grab a 5/32 hex and tighten things up. You may want to start with your kind of center and outer hardware on each individual panel and then come into the center ones here, just to prevent these from trying to misalign when they're being tightened. So once you get your step plates installed, this installation is complete. Now, as always, if you guys have any questions at all about any product we offer here at Victory 4x4, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or call us at 269-459-8447.